What's going on, guys? David with Heights Canine back here with another episode of David the Dog Trainer's Q&A something. I don't remember what I called it on the old YouTubes, but we're doing another episode. So just got back from a busy week at our Heights Columbus facility. I spent Monday through Friday there working with the staff, working with the trainers down there, working with some clients, and really working on developing that branch a little bit. So that was a lot of fun. Back here in Cleveland, heading right back into it. It's Sunday. I worked yesterday and today, so got a lot of stuff to do, a lot of things going on. I am coming up on another Chicago trip here this coming weekend, so if anybody's looking for lessons down there while I'm there, you still got time to hit me up. So I'm gonna start cranking through some of these questions. We got a decent amount of submissions, some newer questions this time, newer types of questions this time, so I'm gonna try and get into some new stuff today. So first things first, I got a couple of questions on puppy things, so we're going to start with that. So I'm going to group these two questions together because they're very similar. So the first one is, any tips on building a puppy's confidence? The second question is how to build a good foundation for a puppy without introducing too much structure too quickly. And both of these are really good ideas. I feel like most of the time, most of my posts that I make, all that kind of stuff is really targeted towards behavioral modification. I work with a lot of aggression and stuff, but in addition to that, I do work with a ton of puppies, a ton of younger dogs under 6 months old, you know, right over 8 weeks old. And we do things a lot differently with those dogs than we do with some of the older dogs. When we're not trying to, you know, eliminate poor behaviors in dogs, and instead we're trying to build a good foundation and, you know, essentially not create these behavioral issues in the first place, you could do things in a little bit different of a manner. So a couple of things that I do here that both build the confidence as well as create a good foundation for the dog is I kind of forget the idea in my head that the obedience truly matters, right? So, you know, I'm not worried about pressing things and getting the recall and the bed stays and the down stays and all that kind of stuff looking really, really perfect just yet. Instead, I'm going to spend my time utilizing teaching the obedience in a way that's more than anything just building a good work ethic for the dog. So instead of really rushing those things, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to work a lot more with the puppy's motivation, right? So I'm going to use a ton of food with the dog. I'm going to use a ton of, you know, praise and toys and things like that. And I'm really going to take my time shaping those behaviors. So there's a lot of fantastic DVDs and stuff there on things that you could be doing with this, and articles and videos and stuff like that. But more than anything, you want to be using a ton of reinforcement when you're teaching these obedience commands. And if you do that and you take your time with that, you know, you should have, by the time your dog is like 5 months old or something, you know, a really good foundation in place of those obedience commands. In addition to that, on the contrary, we're going to want to be only communicating very specific inhibitions in the dog, right? So there are certain things that puppies do that we want to stop right away, right? We don't want them mouthing at us all the time, right? We don't want them on jumping on people and all that kind of stuff. So I am going to start tackling those things, but I'm not really going to get into a whole lot of like e-collar stuff and things like that. Instead, I'll use something a little bit more simple, like say a squirt bottle. I'll condition a no marker with a pet corrector or something, and I'll work using those kind of slightly less aversive tools in order to create slight inhibitions. In addition to that, most of my first puppy sessions that I do with dogs, you know, 90% of that first lesson, the first 40 to 50 minutes of it really is us talking about all of the little things that you can be doing with your dog or you could not be doing with your dog in order to make sure that we're not reinforcing a lot of those things. So if you look at a puppy, like an 8 or 10 week old puppy, those dogs don't have, you know, any preconceived like notions of like things they should be doing, right? They don't just come out like thinking, you know, like I've rehearsed jumping for 4 years, so it's a really strong ingrained habit, or barking at things, or, you know, separation anxiety, or any of those things. So we have to be aware of how important all of our interactions with a dog that young are in reinforcing those things, right? If your puppy doesn't start barking in the crate or doesn't start jumping on people or anything like that, but then it starts to 2 months later, that usually means we're doing something to encourage it. So break down all of your interactions with your dog and really understand that, again, we're not raising a puppy, right? We're raising an adult dog that currently is a puppy. So all those cutesy little things that you do with the dogs, like picking them up and carrying them everywhere and stuff like that, we don't want to be doing a lot of that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we realize that we want to get that dog behaving just like an adult, and then obviously building their confidence through the training, through building the work ethic, teaching engagement in new places, socializing the dog properly and not putting too much emphasis on socializing, just getting them exposed to new things. So, puppies are an interesting topic that, I think I'm going to start, talking a little bit more about. I'm going to try and get some more video of and stuff, because they are a ton of fun. And like I said, there's a lot of little things where, if you start doing these things when they're young, you shouldn't run into as many of the behavioral issues that we see when these dogs are adults. So we're going to move on to the next question here. The next one is proofing exercises once obedience behaviors have been taught. The next part of the question is e-collar tech versus Dogtra collars. And the third question is favorite style of beer after working dogs. So I'm going to dive into each individual one of these questions. You're cheating a little bit here by asking 3, but I'm still going to get into them. Okay, so proofing exercises once obedience behaviors have been taught. So obviously, we need to be aware of the fact that we have to make sure the dog can hold commands or comply with commands around distance, duration, and distractions, right? So say I'm teaching a down stay or I'm teaching a bed stay. My first step is I want to be able to create a little bit of distance between myself and the dog, right? So the first step is just making sure that we're creating distance, right? Put the dog in a bed stay, walk away, walk back to them, reward them if they do well, correct them if they don't do well, and get them into position. Next would be duration, so time that the dog is on the object. If the dog is in a bed stay or a down stay, same deal. We want to work our way from 2 minutes to 4 minutes to 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour, right? There should be no reason why when you're working your dogs and you're doing down stays or bed stays, the dog can't hold those positions for, at least 30 minutes. I mean, I've worked on them for upwards of an hour to an hour and a half before as well. So we want to make sure both of those things are proofed first around minimal distraction, so we can create that distance and we can work around the duration, right? So the dog can hold it for extended periods of time in those situations. From there, we start adding distractions in, right? So with bed stays or down stays and stuff like that, we want to, one, make sure the dog is not getting distracted by environmental things going on. So there's certain cues that dogs have that get them really stimulated and excited and think that they might want to pop out of position. So a lot of dogs, if you put them in a down stay and you start jogging, that excitement, it's something they don't typically see when we're working on obedience. So do things that the dog isn't used to seeing in training sessions. Jogging, running backwards real quick. You could bounce a tennis ball if you want to, right? Crouching down, even things as simple as I've seen, put a dog in a down stay and then go sit in a chair next to them. Sometimes that cue alone, a lot of dogs really want to come to you and get some sort of affection or something. So you could work on things like that as well. And then, ultimately making sure that we're doing it in a lot of different places. That's the big thing. Dogs don't generalize very well, right? So if you teach a down stay really, really good around all these distance, duration, and distractions in one environment, that doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it at the park, right? Or at Home Depot or, anywhere else you may need to take them. So focus less on specific proofing drills with the dog and focus more on proofing the dog in different environments, right? So get them a lot of different places and make sure that you're creating that working association that they may have at your facility or at your home, but in all sorts of different environments. Remember, our training center or your house or wherever the dog is best isn't some magical place, right? It doesn't have this aura around it that says you have to behave when you get in here. Those places develop those associations through consistency of training in them, right? So because of that, there's absolutely no reason why you could create that same association and that same aura in new places that you go. And each time you do it in a different place, you're going to see it's going to get easier and easier and easier for the dog. So focus less on all the fancy things, right? Obviously, I went over a couple of things that you could do, but focus more so on the idea of working the dog a lot of different places. That's how you truly get a real world, reliable dog with this kind of stuff. All right, second question, e-collar tech versus Dogtra collars. So e-collar technologies and Dogtra are two of the leading manufacturers in remote collars, so electronic collars that we use with dogs. I have used just about every single model of both of them, and there are pluses and minuses to both of them, I think. I personally like e-collar technologies for both my dogs as well as my clients' dogs for a couple of reasons. One is the price. So the mini educator that I use is about $180, and the features on that $180 collar compared to the features on the $180 version of Dogtra are significantly different. So there's no LED readout for the number on the Dogtra collar, so you have to kind of play around and guess almost where you're at, where when you're working as low as we do, that could be problematic. The ergonomics of the actual controller, it's easier to operate the Mini Educator with one hand without looking at it than the Dogtra collar is, especially going up and down in the levels quickly. In addition to that, you have an optional boost function that you could set on it. So if I want to set the second button on the Mini Educator to be, 10 or 15 or 20 higher than whatever it is that the dog typically works at, I have the ability to do that, where the Dogtra collars, I don't think any of them have a presettable boost. And then just in addition to that, I really like the branding of it, honestly. I think Dogtra really caters to sport dogs, military dogs, things like that, hunting dogs, and the Mini Educator really has a nice branding for just the family dog, right? It's appealing to it, even the name in itself, right? It sounds a little nicer, and when e-collars get the stigma that they already do, I think that's a really, really, really valuable thing, is to be able to brand it and market it in a way where it doesn't sound like this terrible device, because it's not. So that's my biggest thing. Even with my personal dogs, I use the e-collar Technologies 2-dog unit. I love it. I think it's a really great collar. I use the waterfowler one. I like the skin on it, and it has a little bit more of a range and a little bit more power to it. The other big thing about it is e-collar Technologies 2-dog unit. You have the ability to lock in individual levels for the dogs. So I think that is essential if you have 2 dogs you're working with that are all over the place level-wise. Say one works at a 30, the other works at a 5 or a 10. You have the ability to set those ranges for each individual dog without needing to mess around with it a whole lot. The Dogtra collar is a huge, huge, huge pain in the ass. I don't know why they don't fix it already. You have to manually go up and down each time you need to correct. And if you're out off leash with 2 dogs, that could be, you could accidentally overstim a dog really, really easily with that. So I don't like that at all. Favorite style of beer after working dogs. Bumbleberry is just my go-to. Fatheads makes a really, really fucking good beer. So if anybody out there wants to buy me beer, you could buy me some Bumbleberry and send it to 10237 Berea Road, Unit J, Cleveland, Ohio, 44102. Thanks. Alrighty. Any tips on fear of doorways? Not all, but just some inside the home. What type of process should I use to break this? Okay, so fear of any sort of random thing. So some dogs get really, really nervous or insecure around, going through doorways or sewer grates, or I've even had some dogs where the first time you try to get them onto a bed, it's like that new texture and surface is just weird to them. So stairways, that's another big one we see with puppies and dogs alike. So my big thing is I don't want to totally force the dog through those situations, but I want to remove their ability of doing anything else. So instead of coaxing them through with food and stuff, I want to build their confidence and show them, trust me, follow my direction here, and ultimately I'm going to get you over that hurdle, and I'm going to tell you what's scary and what's not scary. So say I have a doorway the dog is nervous of going through. I'm going to start walking through that doorway. The second the dog puts on the brakes, I'm going to apply steady but consistent pressure in the direction that I need them to go, which is through the doorway. I'll try to keep the leash as parallel to the ground as I can, and I'm going to hold that direction and I'm going to hold that pressure until the dog takes one step in the right direction. Then I relieve it, right? So they put the brakes on, they oppose, I don't want to do it, I'm scared, and then all of a sudden you get, then we relieve the tension, right? So we're using negative reinforcement. We're reinforcing that step in the right direction by removing the pressure. We give them a second to feel that and sense that relief, and then we repeat the process. And we do that little by little until the dog consistently starts going through. You're gonna find each time you get them over that hurdle, it gets smoother, it gets smoother, it gets smoother, it gets smoother. Same concept applies with the stairs, same concept applies with getting onto random objects and things. We want to just remove their ability of doing anything else without dragging them on it. It gets real easy. You could drag them through the doorway, right? But like ultimately, they're not making that decision of, okay, I'm gonna try this. And what happens is when we use the negative reinforcement in that way, where we reinforce those little bits of trying, it makes that behavior stronger and stronger, and it makes the dog feel more like they're in control of the situation. From there, you could start bringing food into the mix. So say the dog consistently starts going through, then I'll begin reinforcing correct behavior. But I'm really big on not using that food as a bribe in that situation, but simply using it to reinforce the correct decision that I want, right? So get them to go through it, take away their ability of doing anything else using consistent, steady pressure, and then start reinforcing that behavior as much as you can. So, We're gonna do one more question here because I'm real great at rushing this and putting it right before lessons that I have. And I think I have a lesson up front right now. So we're gonna get one more here. Alrighty. What do we got here? Becoming neutral to people, dogs, cats, environment as a whole. Okay, so this goes into the whole concept of environmental socialization, right? And the biggest mistake that I see people make. People make the mistake that they need to socialize the dog to everything. The dog needs to be able to interact with things. The dog needs to go to the brewery and play with other dogs. The dog needs to be able to greet every person and dog out on the walk. The dog needs to go into environments and do this and sniff around, and you know, the thought that the walk is for the dog and they should be an autopilot the whole time and stuff like that. And people make this huge mistake of putting the dog totally in control of that kind of stuff. If you want a dog that is environmentally neutral, what that means is you have a dog that can pay attention to you no matter what's going on in the environment. So all of my dogs, when they were puppies or when I first got them, I spent tons and tons and tons of time taking them everywhere with me. I took them everywhere with me. I, worked on engagement work with them. I trained them in new environments. And the other big thing is I did not let them interact with any of those things, right? No people, no dogs. If somebody came up to me and asked, can I pet your dog or can our dogs meet? Sorry, they're training. I'm very, very clear about that. Because of that, I didn't develop any associations with my dogs that any of these things were going to cause any excitement, because it just didn't happen, right? They went to these places, nobody interacted with them. So they started seeing people as less exciting things and just, well, there's somebody there. It's kind of like furniture, right? I'm not even going to pay attention to it because I'm not going to get anything from it. From there, once I started getting that and training them in those environments, I started gathering more attention because everything else became less distracting to them. Now, if you have a dog that you're trying to work through problems that you're having with this, that you have a history of doing a lot of these different things, or the dog getting really aroused in these environments and stuff, you got to take a couple of steps back. So treat them like they were a puppy again. Begin taking them to all these environments. And first and foremost, make sure you're removing all of that interaction. Make sure the environment is not creating excitement in any way, shape, or form, because they're not getting anything from those situations. In addition to that, you're going to have to start providing consequences for certain behaviors. So all of those, habits that they have of launching towards a person, launching towards a dog, launching towards a cat, any of those things, we need corrections for those. We need to start tying consequences to doing those certain things and making sure they're understanding, same deal. You need to pay attention to me in these situations, not everything else going on, right? So by removing the reinforcement and then reinforcing what we want or what we don't want by training them in those environments, you're going to get over this hurdle. Prey is obviously harder than like dogs and people and stuff. So if your dog struggles with chasing cats, I would highly recommend making sure you're using a training tool that's appropriate for getting them over that hurdle. So remote collars, pet convincers are really good for stuff like that. And then reinforcing the dog not moving in the direction of those things. So I have a lot of videos on this on my YouTube page. Watch both the introducing a prong collar video that I have, as well as teaching the dog to walk behind you video that I have. You're going to see both of those are going to outline how to get the dog paying attention to you in new environments. And you're going to see both of those are going to outline the exact same process that I do with all of my clients and how I get them into that hurdle. So one, make sure you're not reinforcing it in any way, shape, or form. You're removing all of the excitement in the environment. Two, make sure that you're teaching the dog to comply with you in those situations. And exposure, 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 right? Puppies, adult dogs, anything it may be, we need exposure. So that was the last question. Pretty good. Product placement, Aquafina. This Q&A is sponsored by, especially on a hot day like this. So we're going to keep plugging away with it. That's it. Have a good day.